All right, so now we're solving quadratic equations using square roots. So we can see that in part A, all we got to do if we're solving is get x by itself. So let's see how we can do this. Looking at this equation here, notice that this equation is already set equal to 0. It's like basically someone had this equation originally as y equals 3x squared plus 48, but then they set y equal to 0, right? So that's why we have one side equal to 0. Now, why would they be doing that? Well, it's because we're trying to figure out the x-intercept, right? So we're trying to figure out the x-intercept, in other words, where the parabola crosses the x-axis. That's what we've been doing for 2 weeks now. So in order to figure this out, we set this equal to 0. So let's solve this out. Let's try to get x by itself. So what do we need to do first? Well, we need to move some terms over or something over. And we first remove this 48 because it's the furthest thing away from the x. So we subtract 48 on both sides. This allows this to cancel. Let's see what we bring down here. It looks like we have, oh, that's a highlighter, my bad. We have 3x squared drops down, and then we have the equal sign drop down, 0 minus 48, that's negative 48. Next, we need to remove that 3 next to that x squared, so we divide by 3. And so the 3's cancel out. So I'm left with x squared on this side. Negative 48 divided by 3, that gives me 16. You might want to check me on that, but I think it's 16. Negative 16. And so then I need to take the square root of both sides to get rid of that square on that x. So that cancels out. And that leaves me with just x. But what did we learn about yesterday here whenever we have a square root of a negative number? Well, anytime I see a negative number, I am going to rewrite the square root as a positive number and then put I next to it. And then from there, I'm going to keep trying to take the square root of that positive number. And the square root of 16 gives me plus or minus 16, or positive negative 4. Sorry, did I say plus or minus 16? I meant to say plus or minus 4i. And there we have it. We have solved for x. Now we're going to go ahead and solve for b. And it's just the same thing. Notice that one side is already set equal to 0, and that's because we're trying to find the x-intercept. Anytime we're trying to find the x-intercept, y is equal to 0. And so in this case here, we are trying to figure out sorry, I just had a blank moment there. We're trying to figure out the x-intercept. So looking at this here, we need to move things around to get x by itself. So I'm going to subtract this 10 to both sides, and so that cancels. And that gives me 2, oh, that's a highlighter, 2x squared equals negative 10. And then I need to divide both sides by 2. And so that's going to cancel out, and x squared is equal to negative 5. I'm going to take both sides and take the square root of both sides. And so x is equal to, let's see here, if we have a negative under the square root, that means that I'm going to get an imaginary number. So remember that I need to make my square root a positive number, put an I next to it to show that it's imaginary. Now, if we take the square root of 5, is that a perfect square root? No, 5 doesn't have two numbers that multiply to give me 5. So in the end, we just keep it under the root, and we can't simplify the square root of 5 either, but we do need to have a plus or minus in the front of that, and that's it.